figured I'd give this a try and see what it is. So, let's see. Welcome. Please select a story. Oh, well-known stories. H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe, and let's just do the Edgar Allan Poe. Hello there, friend. Fiends, are you hungry for another helping of horror? Well, the special today is going to chill you to the bone. This story is a personal favorite of mine, so gather around, fiends, and listen to this cold horror classic called The Tell-Tall Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. True, nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous. I have been and am, but why will you say that I am mad? Disease has sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard it all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearkens and observe how heavily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. Oh yeah. It's impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold, I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whether it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad? Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissolution. I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night around midnight, I turned the latch to his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then, when I made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shined out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then when my head was in the room, I undid the lanterns cautiously, oh so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight, I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been very profound old man, indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. I watched Minut's hand move more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that I was opening the door little by little, and not even the dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. Perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was black as pitch, with a thick darkness, for the shutters were closed. Fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not have seen the opening of the door, and I kept pushing in steadily. I had my head in and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped upon the thin fastening, and the old man sprung up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quiet, still, and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up on his bed, listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. No, hang on a sec. There we go. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or grief. Oh no, it was the low, stifled sound that arose from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew that sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening in its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I know that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fear has been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them careless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, it is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crawling the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp. Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these superstitions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death in approaching him had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was that mournful influence of unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. And so I opened it. You cannot imagine how steadily, until at length a single dim ray like the thread of a spider shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with the perfect distinctions, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct precisely upon that damned spot. And now that I have told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses, Now I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionlessly. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart continued. Tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder. I say louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, and so am I. And now, at the dead hour of night, and at the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minute longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder, louder. I thought the heart might burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer than when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. Hang on, I'm just gonna get comfortable. Give me a minute. No, I got it. The night waned, and I worked hastily but in silence. I took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scaffoldings. I then replaced the board so cleverly and so cunning that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too weary for that. When I made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect sanity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicious of foul play had been aroused. Information had been logged at the police office. And they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secured undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest for their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner has convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered clearly, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chattered. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained deafness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt now I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I rose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, having excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it across the boards, but the noise rose over all and continuously increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chattered pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no! No! They heard! They suspected! They knew! They were making a mockery of my horror! This I thought, and this I think! But anything was better than this agony! Anything was more tolerable than this deration! I could bear these hypocritical smiles no longer! I felt that I must scream or die, and now, again, hark! Louder! 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 Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more! I admit the deed! Tear up the planks! Here! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart! The end! What a shocker, huh, fiends? The story was sure a lot to digest. I hope you had your fill, because it's closing time. Good night, and have sweet nightmares, fiends. Okay, so that's the Telltale Heart. Let's see, let's do this one. Greetings, fiends! Did you come back for more? I just settled in my coffin for a little nap. I suppose I could tell you a story before I enter my morbid slumber. I have a real gem tonight about a gentleman named Henry who wakes up to find himself in a real tight spot. So, fiends, lay back in your coffins and listen to this chiller. It's called One Summer Night by Ambrose Bierce. I think you'll really dig this story. To be honest, I never heard of this story, so this should be interesting. The fact that Henry Armstrong was buried did not seem to him to prove that he was dead. He had always been a hard man to convince that he really was buried. The testimony of his senses compelled him to admit. His posture, flat upon his back, and his hands crossed upon his stomach, and tied with something that he easily broke without properly altering the situation. The strict confinement of his entire person, the black darkness and profound silence, made a body of evidence impossible to convert, and he accepted it without care, or cavil. But dead? No. He was only very, very ill. He had, withal, the invalid apathy and did not greatly concern himself about the uncommon fate that has been allotted to him. No philosopher was he, just a plain commonplace person, gifted for the time being with a pathological indifference. The organ that he feared consequence was with Turpin. So with no particular apprehensions for his intermediate future, he fell asleep and was all peace with Henry Armstrong. But something was going on overhead. It was a dark summer night, shot through the infrequent shimmers of lightning silently flirting a cloud laying low in the west and portending a storm. These brief stammering illuminations brought out with ghastly distinction the monuments and headstones of the cemetery and seemed to set them dancing. It was not a night at which any credible witness was likely to be staying about the cemetery. So the three men who were there, digging into the graves of Henry Armstrong, felt reasonably secure. Two of them were young students from a medical college a few miles away. The third was a gigantic person known as Jess. Don't feel comfortable saying that though, so I'm not going to say it. For many years, Jess had been employed by the cemetery as a man of all work, and it was his favorite pleasantry that he knew every soul in the place. From the nature of what he had been doing, it was inferable that the place was not so populous as it registered it may have shown it to be. Okay, some of these old English, old English wordings and sentences are a little bit tricky to read, because it's not that used that often. Outside the wall, part of the grounds furthest from the public road, were a horse and a light wagon waiting. The work of excavation was not difficult. The earth which had been graved had been loosely filled a few hours before offered little resistance and was soon thrown out. Removal of the casket from its box was less easy, but it was taken out, for it was a prerequisite of Jess, who carefully unscrewed the covers and laid it aside, exposing the body in black trousers and white shirt. At the instant the earth sprang to flame, a crackling shock of thunder shook the stunned world, and Henry Armstrong tranquilly sat up. With inarticulate cries, the men fled in terror, each in a different direction. For nothing on earth could two of them have been persuaded to return. But Jess was of another breed. In the grey morning, the two students, gale and haggard from anxiety and with terror of their adventure still beating tumultuously in their blood, met at the medical college. "You saw it!" cried one. "God, yes! What are we to do?" They went around to the rear of the building where they saw a horse attached to a light wagon, hitched at the gatepost near the door of the dissecting room. Mechanically, they entered the room. On the bench, the obscenity sat Jess. He rose, grinning, all eyes and teeth. "I'm waiting for my pay," he said. Stretched naked on the long table lay the body of Henry Armstrong, the head defiled with blood and clay from the blow with a spade. That was it? The end. Well, fiends, what did you think of the ending? What a killer ending, eh? Well, if you excuse me, I must catch some shut-eye. That kind of story gives me some most wonderful nightmares, and I cannot wait to embrace them. Sleep tight and have sweet nightmares. That was a weird story. Very weird. Alright, last one, and that is Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. Greetings, fiends. You're just in time for a story. I have a ghoulish tale for you about a man who gets lost and makes a chilling discovery. There are things out there far more terrifying than your worst nightmares. Let me turn to the right page. Ah, here it is. This story is called Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. Now sit back, fiends. Listen and prepare to be chilled to the bone. Okay, that's I am writing this under an apprentice mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless and at the end of my supplies of the drug, which alone make life endurable. I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from the garret windows into the square street below. Do not think of my slavery to morphine, that I am weakling or degenerate. When you have read those hastily scribbled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why is that I have forgetfulness or death. It was in one of the most open and least frequent parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I have lapsed. Okay, that was a drag, I think. Of which I was probably fell affected to the mean German sea navy. The Great War was then at the very beginning. The ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degeneration, so that our vessel was made legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated as all fairness and consideration due to us as naval prisoners. So liberal indeed was the disciples of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a complete competent navigator, I can only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable island. Or habitable land, sorry. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heavenly vastness of the unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. In details I should never know it, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-vested, was continuous. When at last I awakened, it was to discover myself half sucking into the slimy expansive of hellish black maw, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, in which my boat had grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected at the transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished. For there was in the air and in the rotting soil of sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other less disreputable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the untold hideousness that dwelled in absolute silence and buried immensity. There was nothing within human, and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime. Yet that very completeness of the stillness and homogeneous of the landscape oppressed me with the nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from the sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless fluid, so reflecting the inky parchment. As I crawled into the expanded boat, I realized that only one feeling could explain my position. But some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been arome to the surface, exposing regions which were inured millions of years had laid hidden under the unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, strain my ears as I might. Nor were there any sea-fowl prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking of brooding in a boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness, and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning I found soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was so much concerned with the graver things, the mind so slight and evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a far-away hummock which was higher than any other elevation of the desert rolling up on the rolling desert. That night I encamped, and on the following day still traveled towards the hummock, though the object seemed scantly nearer than when I had first espied it. By the fourth evening I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance, and an intervening valley setting it out in a sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the warning and fanatical glorified moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions that I have experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the embassy. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was the source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater than I gained from the summit of the mountain. Looked down upon the other side of the first pit tank, whose black recesses the moon and yet soared high enough to illuminate. I felt myself at the edge of the world, leaning over the rim into the fathomless chaos of eternal night. For my terror ran curious frenzy of a paradise lost, and of Satan's hideous climb for the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so meticulously as I have imagined. Ledges and outcropping of rock afforded very easy footholds for the descent, whilst after a drop of a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by the impulses which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentle slopes beneath, gazing into the stunning of depths with no light and had yet penetrated. All at once my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steadily upon the 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was cautious of the distinct impression that the diameter and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I could not express, for despite its enormous magnitude and its position in the abyss, which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I pierced beyond the doubt that the strange object was well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the worship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightening, and yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone widely and vividly upon the towering steeps that heaved in the chasm, and revealed the fact that the far-flying bodies of water flowing at the bottom of the winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope. Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. Whew! That's HP Lovecraft writing. The writings were in the system of hieroglyphs unknown to me, and unlike anything I have ever seen in books, consisting of most parts of the conventional aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, and whales, and of the like. Several characters obviously resemble marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but were decomposing forms I have observed on the ocean plain. The pictorial carving, however, only spellable. Plainly visible across the dividing plain, waters on the account of their long sides, with a way of vast roof, whose subjects who have been deceived by envy of gold. I think these scenes were supposed to depict men at least, a certain sort of men, though the creatures were soon disproportioned like fish in water in some marine grottos, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imaginations of Poe or Bellum, they were damnable humans in general outline despite webbing hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips, ghastly bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportions with their scenic background. For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a were represented as but a little larger than himself. I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing and searing tribe. Some tribes whose last descent had perished eons before the first ancestors of the put-down or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the concepts of most daring anthropologists, I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer likeness on the silent channel before me. Then I suddenly saw it. With only a slight churning to the marks that rose to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, clamorous-like and loathsome, it darted like a scrupulous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, whilst it bowed to its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sound. I think I went mad then. On my frantic ascent on the sloping cliff, and of my dearest journey back to the stranded boat, I remembered little. I believe I snagged a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have instinctively recollections of a great storm, sometime after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know I heard pleas of thunder and other tones of which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in San Francisco hospital, brought hither by the captain of an American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium I said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I know they could not know. Once I saw Earth, slipping in between all with the instinct of the particular question of one ancient, perfectly legend of faith, vision. Soon peacefully, thankfully, was hopelessly confidential. I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is glorious and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug had given me translucent circums and drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written full account for the information or the comfort and amusement of my fellow man. Often I ask myself if it could not have been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat for my own escape from the German man of war. This I ask myself, but never does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may be at this very moment crawling and floundering on a slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols, and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisk of water-soaked grapevines or ravens. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billions to drag down in their reeking talons and remnants of puny war hot exhausted mankind, of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean's floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, and as some immense slimily body lumbered against it. It shall not find me. Guard that hand. The window. The window. The end. How was that one for you, fiends? Old Lovecraft sure could write a ghoulish tale. And that ending. What is it they say? It was thrown right out of the window. Until next time, fiends, good night and have a sweet nightmares. Okay, so that was Horror Tales. It was a pretty interesting, simple visual novel about the classic horror tales of Whatnot. So I'll definitely leave a link in the description box below if you ever want to have a nice little read and, check it out yourself. So, excuse me. In any case, thanks for watching, everybody. Hopefully you've been enjoying this as much as I have. And as always, leave a comment below, subscribe and review your update, share us on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and all those social medias. And don't forget to hit the like button below to help out the channel and to turn on the bell to stay up to date on my channel. If you guys want to help me out in some shape or form, I have a Patreon account down in the description box below. And as usual, thank you for watching, everybody, and have a pleasant day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Smartphone users, press the button down there. PC users, please subscribe to my channel by hitting the link up there. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. Also, you there, the one who didn't follow my orders? I'm coming for you now.